Welcome to Strange Dimensions. The interface to alternate realities. Contact experiences. And mysterious phenomena. And now your host for Strange Dimensions Radio. Here's Rosemary Ellen Guiley.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another new expanded edition of Strange Dimensions Radio. That's right, we have expanded the show from 1 hour to 2. We launched that last week on my 1-year anniversary with KGRA, and that's in response to audience request. More show to bring you the best of everything out there in the paranormal and mysterious fields. Now, tonight, we have a really terrific show lined up for you. Lots of experts talking about one of the most intriguing of unknown entities, the winged humanoid, and a wave of sightings that has been going on in the Chicago area since early April this year, maybe even a little longer because there are sightings beyond this year as well. So what's going on? Has Mothman made a comeback? Is it Mothman's cousins coming back? What's going on with these giant winged humanoids that people are seeing flying over Chicago? So we're going to hear from two of the best researchers of mysterious creatures, Lon Strickler and Ken Gerhard. They've been guests on this show before. I'm so pleased to have them back. And also joining us are paranormal investigators Nicole Tito Graycheck of Chicago, who has been tracking the sightings, and Terry Rowe of Kansas, who's had some really strange experiences of his own. So I know you're going to find this very interesting tonight, and I invite you to log into the KGRA chat lounge and check out the bios and the photos posted there of our guests tonight, as well as 2 eyewitness drawings of the winged things that have been seen over the Windy City. Now, before we get going tonight, just a couple of announcements on my end. As you know, I'm always busy on the road doing events, and I'd like to tell you about a couple of them coming up soon. Next Tuesday, June 20th, I will be in New York City at the Alchemist Kitchen talking about dream visits from the dead. The early bird tickets are sold out, and we're nearly sold out of the next tier of tickets, but there is still room to join in. Hope to see you there. And next weekend, June 23rd and 24th, I will be in Alton, Illinois at Troy Taylor's annual Fabulous Haunted America conference. I go every year. Now, for information on both events and what I'm also going to be talking about at Troy's, you can get the details at my website, visionaryliving.com. So let's bring on my first guest tonight, Lon Strickler. Lon is a longtime friend of mine. He is an author and paranormal researcher, and he has been running the Fabulous Phantoms and Monsters blog since 2005. This is a daily digest of everything weird going on, and if you aren't a subscriber, you should be, because nothing gets past Lon. If it's weird, if it's strange, if it's breaking news, he's on it. And he's also the author of several books on weird encounters with strange entities and humanoids of all kinds. His newest title is Phantoms and Monsters, Unexplained Encounters. We were talking about that last year on this show, and in fact, you can get that show in the archives, KGRA archives. He is also co-host with Sean Forker and Butch Witowski of Arcane Radio, and that airs on Wednesday nights at 10 p.m. Eastern. So after you're done listening to Strange Dimensions, hop on over to Arcane Radio and check out what he's got coming up. Website is phantomsandmonsters.com. So I'm so pleased to have you back on the show, Lon. Thanks for coming on.
No, thanks for having me, Rosemary.
Well, you know, we were talking just a little bit about before the start of the show that, you know, we've known each other quite a few years now, and we've talked about our research and our cases. I've been on your show, and we've exchanged information, and yet we finally just met for the first time recently at the Bigfoot camping adventure in May. It was such a treat, and I just wish the weather had cooperated better so we could have hung out a little longer.
Yeah, it was it was an interesting weekend, but it was really nasty. I got to meet a lot of people I had never met before, including you, which was very nice, and I'm finally glad we got a chance to meet.
Well, the internet connects us in very intimate and personal ways, and it's not unusual to feel like you really know somebody just from having email and text message and phone conversations with them. And but still, there's really nothing like finally meeting face to face. And folks, this weekend in Pennsylvania, it was something. It was a great event, but Mother Nature just didn't cooperate, and so much of it was outdoors. But the several hundred folks who showed up for it, the Pennsylvania Bigfoot camping adventure that Eric Altman arranged, they were really hardy types, and we all had a great time. So hope to see you at a future event, Lon. But you've been tracking this wave of sightings in Chicago, and you've talked to eyewitnesses. So what's happening there?
Well, this all originally started back in 2011. There were 3 sightings in the Chicago area back then, and they were mostly described as a large bat, flying bat. One person described it as it was from Tasmania, described as a large sugar glider. It looked like one of the sugar gliders they were familiar with at home. But the size, it was normally around 5 to 6 foot high. Some people had seen it perched at locations. But as far as I know, there were only 3 reported sightings. So, that waned off. That only lasted from August 2011 to the beginning of October 2011, and then there weren't any more sightings. But to the present, the first report that we received was on April 7th of this year, and this was in the Lincoln Park area of Chicago in Oz Park. The witness stated that she came across a large humanoid, probably 7 foot or taller, standing in the park. It was solid black, but what really stood out were the large pair of wings that were folded behind it. Now, these wings stood taller than the humanoid by at least 1.5 feet and jutted out of its back. She stated that she couldn't see the face as it had turned away from her, but it finally turned. She noticed that it had bright ruby red eyes that appeared to glow. So she watched it for a minute. She was actually walking her dog. It was still daylight, and this thing, as it looked at her, it just shot straight up in the air, and then when it got up to a certain height in the air, it unfurled the wings and took off. So that sighting came into UFO Clearinghouse. Manuel Navarrete is the chief investigator over there, and he contacted me right away about it. So, this was all well and good. I thought, well, maybe we got one sighting maybe related to 2011. I didn't think much about it. But not long after that, about a week later, on the 15th of April, a report came into MUFON, and this was at the Chicago International Produce Market. It was 2:00 in the morning, and there were multiple witnesses. These were truck drivers that were, I guess, coming in to load. The description was that it was completely black except for it had bright yellowish reddish eyes like a cat. It stood there for a minute or two staring at everyone before shooting up in the sky and disappearing. They stated that it made everyone feel uneasy and only took off after somebody threw a rock at it. It had the wings like an owl, only bigger, and you could hear it flap the wings when it took off. Now, I wasn't able to talk to any of these witnesses for this because it went into MUFON, and of course I can't get a hold of their witness information. Now, the first sighting in Oz Park Manuel did talk to the woman and got an interview from her. So this is the second sighting we had. So let's see. Yeah, the next sighting. Go ahead.
Interesting that these things shoot up in the air, almost like rockets, and they don't seem to need their wings, and sometimes they use them and sometimes they don't.
Yeah, most of the sightings, while they're in the air, is that they're kind of gliding or floating. It's interesting. Very few people have seen it flap its wings. The next sighting was actually the next day in Humboldt Park, and there were multiple witnesses again. It was an owl-like humanoid that stood on 2 feet and looked right at the witnesses. The description was, they actually called it a huge lacusa, except it was about 6 foot tall and had large glowing red eyes. Now, lacusa is a legendary owl-like creature from the Rio Grande area in southern Texas and northern Mexico. According to legend, it's an owl that turns into a woman. But this is what they described it, and I believe the witnesses were Hispanic. So we didn't. Again, this is a report that came in the MUFON, and we weren't able to get any interview out of them. So the next sighting was another report in the MUFON, and this was on the 15th. So we've had 3 sightings within 2 days, and in different parts of the city. This was at Montrose Beach, which is in North Chicago. There were multiple witnesses. The witnesses were on a boat about 1.5 miles out in Lake Michigan, and they saw a bat-like flying humanoid 6 to 7 foot in body length with solid black eyes that seemed to reflect the moonlight. Now, excuse me, a solid black with eyes that seemed to reflect the moonlight. So when this thing flew off, about a minute or so later, the witnesses stated that they saw a bright green UFO streak across the horizon. So I don't know if that was a meteorite or what it was, but that was part of the report. So the next sighting was reported to Manuel Navarrete and at UFO Clearinghouse. This was at the Little Calumet River near East 130th Street. Now, this is southern Chicago. Described as solid black, the size of a full-grown man, had wings that must have been 10 foot from tip to tip, flew up and out of sight within seconds. It was a man and his son, and he stated that he called it literally a bat out of hell, and that it made a weird sound like a train brake when it's slowing down. So I think Manuel did talk to that witness, but that was about all they. That's all the report they had. So let's see. The next witness was in. This was downtown Chicago. Now, this was a report that was from MUFON, but this was in an area, a marina area where the Chicago River empties into the Lake Michigan. Now, this time, there were 2 of these flying beings seen, and they were actually doing figure-8 maneuvers above the witnesses. This was in downtown Chicago, and at the end, where the Chicago River empties into Lake Michigan. And again, there were multiple witnesses. They did state that it flew south towards the Adler Planetarium, and that there happened to be a Coast Guard helicopter in the vicinity, but it didn't follow it. So I doubt it even saw the pair.
Now, that's unusual for two to be seen, because when people have these flying humanoid sightings, it's usually a single figure, isn't it?
Yeah, this is the first time I ever remember two being seen at one time. Actually, as the description, we go further into the descriptions of the later sightings, they are more bat-like. So I don't know if we're dealing with a shapeshifter or we're dealing with at least two of these things. I tend to believe there's at least two. So the next sighting was also in the same day as that past sighting, and this was in downtown Chicago. It was about 8 o'clock at night at the Chicago Riverwalk at Columbus Drive Bridge. Now, the woman and her daughter stated that it was a large winged person flying just above the water, then pulling up and going over the bridge. And he said it looked like a huge owl or even a bat, but completely black with the exception of two large eyes that appeared red. And that was the first sketch we got. And I had to mention, most of these witnesses had attempted to get photographic evidence, but it was either too dark, too fast, or it just did not come out. Which is interesting. I mean, they couldn't, they tried to take it, but sometimes, I mean, it just didn't show up in the digital camera. So
I hear that all the time, and yeah. I'm of the opinion that these are intelligent things we're dealing with, and they deliberately know how to cloak themselves from cameras.
Yeah, that very well may be it, because I don't know, I don't know what's causing that. People people that have witnessed Bigfoot have said the same thing, that they've had something. They tried to take a picture. They know they should have got a picture, but it just didn't turn out. Now, I missed the sighting. I'm sorry. On May 5th, there was another one at Calumet Park. Now, this is a park in southern Chicago that's right on Lake Michigan. And this time, the witness was a law enforcement officer and his son. And he said that it was a flying humanoid, about 6 foot in length and blackish grayish in color, and had an enormous pair of wings that must have been 8 to 10 foot in width. It was flew over them toward the field house in the park, and they said they also heard other witnesses react to seeing it. Now, this is a report that came into Manuel, and he took a report from them, but again, it wasn't much more than that evidence. And they had tried to get a photograph. This thing was too fast and took off ahead of them. So the next sighting was called in to me. It was called about Saturday evening on the May 27th. This was the Calumet Park neighborhood in the vicinity of 127th and Ashland Avenue. It was about 7:30 at night. There was a couple stated that they first thought that it was a black helicopter because of the size. The distance wasn't determined. The object then rose further into the sky, and it became apparent that it was a large human-like being with wings. They described it as black in color, and it was flying without moving its wings. They were shocked at the size as it silhouetted across the moon, which was visible in the late clear evening. There was still considerable light, but too dark to get a discernible video or photograph with their cell phone, though there was an attempt to capture photographic evidence. Now, they determined that it was not a plane or glider, but a living being of unknown origin. The description by the woman was that it looked like a large black flying man with wings. Now, the thing, they didn't see any type of wing movement. It basically looked like it was gliding, but it was close enough that they could tell it wasn't some type of drone or anything like that. And in fact, these witnesses that I talked to in particular, they did embellish their stories. they told me what they saw, and I kind of tried to get them to, try to embellish on the story, but they wouldn't do it, which is fairly unusual. The power suggested did work with these people. They knew what they saw and they stuck to it. So
now you meant. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, you had mentioned that as these sightings go along, the descriptions of these things get more bat-like.
Right.
And do you have any idea what's going on there? If we're dealing with two creatures, did one of them go away?
I don't know. You see, I don't know that. I mean, it's unusual. The next sighting that I received was the earliest sighting, and this one was from 22nd of March. And this also had that bat look to it. So, the bat description was very early, then later, and then recently. So, I don't know. I mean, this is what gets me wondering if it's not two different type of beings. But anyway, this was on the 22nd of March. This was a truck driver. Name was Billy Bance, and it was about noon, and he was at Cicero Avenue and the 290 Expressway. He said that the flying object was in the airspace south coming from Midway International Airport. He described it as Batman and stated that it closely resembled the August 2011 sighting that looked like the sugar glider like I described earlier. He gave me a sketch, and as you can see in the sketch, it's kind of bizarre looking. It's kind of got like a long bullet shape to it with real wide wings on it. And
that sketch, I just want to point out to the listeners, that sketch is posted in the chat room if you'd like to go and check it out.
And but the strange thing about this witness's experience is, since his sighting, he's suffered a bunch of bizarre medical conditions, and in particular, it has much to do with his optic nerve in his eyes. I looked at, in fact, he sent me all the medical information, and it was quite interesting because it was a rare condition, and he's still suffering from it. So this is interesting too, because so many witnesses of UFOs have had health problems. They've had eye problems, which they feel like they got almost radiation burns. And these flying humanoids also seem to have a UFO connection too, that there are sightings of craft or mysterious lights at about the same time that we're seeing these wing things. Do you have any theories as to what these connections are? Well, the one thing I had noticed, now, first of all, the normal UFO activity that Chicago and around Lake Michigan that we normally get all the time, that's really waned off. That's something we have noticed. But there have been some incidents south of the city, in particularly around the Chicago Heights area. There have been 2 reports of huge flashes of light at night. And there was another sighting just west of that as well. So that's three reports, 3 sightings of huge flashes of light. And, I've looked into it, and I can't find what it would be. So, I don't know if it's connected or not, but it's awful bizarre.
Why do you think that there are 2 creatures? Is it because of the difference in some of the descriptions?
Yeah, I do believe. I believe I think that's why I do believe that. I mean, it just seems that, I don't know, just the body style and the change, and the way some of them seem to perch, and others just seem to stay up in the air.
Okay, well, we're coming up on our bottom of the hour break, and when we come back, We're going to get some more thoughts from Lon about what's going on in the skies over Chicago with these winged flying humanoids. Nicole Tito Graycheck is going to join us for a few minutes to talk about her association. She's a native of Chicago. She's been following these sightings. We're going to try and get to the bottom of it. So don't go away. We'll be right back. Strange Dimensions Radio on kgraradio.com.
Hey there, quick question for you. Would you be okay with more energy, more endurance, thicker, healthier hair, a better mood, reduced appearance of wrinkles, improved sleep, improved blood pressure and cholesterol profiles, improved vision, improved memory? Okay then. Well now, have you heard of Nature's Youth RSF? It's from the anti-aging experts at nature'syouth.com. Nature'syouth.com. See, at Nature's Youth, they understand exactly what it means to provide top quality health products. And Nature's Youth customers not only improve their health, they know they're also providing their body with the right nourishment to maintain that peak performance and fight the aging process. If health, wellness, and nutrition are what you desire, choose Nature's Youth RSF. I did. You see, you're going to get older. It's just up to you how you feel when you get there. Get started today. Nature's Youth RSF. Simple to use, simple to order. Go to nature'syouth.com. That's nature'syouth.com. nature'syouth.com.
You wanted to see me?
Yes, please, have a seat. So here's the thing. When this company brought you on, we took a chance on you. You didn't have that 4-year college degree we typically look for.
Right.
But we gave you a shot anyway. And since then, you've worked incredibly hard and given it your all.
Thanks.
You've been an important asset to the team, but I don't think you can be an intern here anymore. We want to hire you.
You're serious?
Absolutely.
Find your next great employee. Introduce yourself to the grads of life. Who are they? Talent worth knowing about. Young adults of unique determination and experience. An ideal fit for your company in an entry-level position, internship, or even mentorship. They might not have every qualification you typically look for, but they're exactly who your company needs.
I won't let you down.
I know.
Don't miss out on a resource many innovative companies have already discovered. Go to gradsoflife.org to learn how to find, cultivate, and train this great pool of untapped talent. Brought to you by the Ad Council and gradsoflife.org.
KGRARadio.com is your conference connection station.
Hi, this is Ray Hobbs with KGRA Radio calling for Kendra.
This is Kendra.
Kendra, recently you went to KGRARadio.com and clicked on the contest tab and registered to win a cruise. Is that right?
You bet I did.
Kendra, you're a winner.
No, you're kidding. Are you serious?
Kendra, you and a guest will enjoy 7 days and nights aboard the beautiful Norwegian breakaway cruise ship as you depart from New York City, headed for the fabulous Bermuda Islands.
Wow, Ray.
You and your guest are going to get the KGRA VIP experience with a private cocktail reception with all the speakers. You're going to get VIP passes for all the lectures, presentations, panels, Q&A sessions.
Wow.
You're going to get dinner with keynote speaker Eric Von Daniken, Nick Redfern, and Micah Hanks at sea.
It's amazing. Oh, man. I can't even believe it. That's so exciting.
Also included are 2 exclusive shore excursions with speakers on the gorgeous Sunset Catamaran Cruise, and you're going to get to see another side of Bermuda's nightlife aboard the glass-bottom boat on the beautiful Twilight Cruise, and a whole lot more. What do you think, Kendra?
Oh, my gosh. I don't even believe this. I never win anything. This is amazing, Ray. I love KGRA.
All of this is provided by your friends at Holiday Maker Travel, Kendra, and KGRA Radio, valued at over $3,000. You're a winner.
It's amazing.
Kendra, who is your contact for the best UFO paranormal talk radio on the planet, sweetheart?
KGRARadio.com.
KGRARadio.com is your conference connection station.
And we're back. Strange Dimensions Radio tonight, exploring the mystery of flying humanoids and a wave of these things that's been happening over Chicago since early spring. More than a dozen sightings of weird-looking, very tall humanoids with bat-like wings, owl-like wings, shooting up in the sky like rockets, not having to use their wings, some of them looking like bat ships. Nobody knows exactly what they're up to, but people are reporting problems associated with them. And right before we went to break, we were getting the rundown on what's been happening in Chicago with Lon Strickler, who's the publisher of the phantomsandmonsters.com blog. And Lon, you had one more case, actually the most interesting of them all, to tell us about before we bring Nicole on.
Yeah, this was called in to me the night of the occurrence. In fact, it was about an hour after the sighting. This was in the 400 block of North Arlington Place, which is between North Clark Street and North Lakewood Avenue. This is in Lincoln Park community. This was Saturday, the 3rd of June at about 10 p.m. This is the last sighting that we have received, so it's been, about 10 days now. The couple had just finished a late dinner at a local restaurant, and they noticed that the flying anomaly as they were walking on the 400 block of North Arlington Place. The street lights illuminated the figure enough to startle them, so it could not have been very high above the street. And in fact, she told me later that it was just above the treetops. Both witnesses described it as a 7 to 8 foot solid black humanoid with wide membrane wings that resembled those of a huge bat. The wingspan was at least 12 foot. The head was prominent and thinner than a human head. The back end of the body tapered to a point. There were no legs noticed, but it could have been tucked under the body. Now, the figure was gliding quickly along the length of the street heading east, and suddenly ascended to the night sky. Neither heard any sound. Both witnesses stated that they felt a sense of foreboding and were still terrified almost an hour after the encounter. And again, this is another witness that called me that I talked to directly, and they wouldn't embellish on the story at all. I talked to both on the phone at the location, and they knew what they saw. And in fact, another couple who were nearby had made a report to Manuel at UFO Clearinghouse the next day. And their description was fairly the same. So, that's the last sighting we've got. So that's been 10 days ago.
Seems like we're in a bit of a lull here, and maybe they'll be back. But that description it almost sounds like it's straight out of a horror film.
It's different. I'll give you that.
It certainly is. All right. Well, we've got also with us tonight Nicole Tito Graycheck, who is a longtime paranormal investigator, native of Chicago. She knows that city. And I've known Nicole and her husband, Al Graycheck, still newlyweds. And they are part of the co-founding members of the American Spectral Society. And Nicole has worked very closely with another longtime paranormal investigator, Lisa Crick, in EVP work, and their website, ghostly-voices.com, if you want to check that out. Now, Nicole, you have been looking at, are there any patterns to these sightings going on in Chicago? What have you found out?
Yeah, we were looking using Lon's website, which is excellent because Al, my husband, and I were both from Chicago and we're still living there. So we kind of went point by point, looking at the sightings and kind of seeing, what's the neighborhood like? Is there any connection? And honestly, most of the sightings, kind of what Len had been mentioning, are happening on these major riverways. So like the Calumet River, a lot of the sightings are happening down there by the Calumet Park. That flows into Lake Michigan. And then on the other side, some of the sightings are occurring along the south branch of the Chicago River and other branches of Chicago River. So, that seems like it's kind of the major connection, and they're all kind of seeing like they're going into Lake Michigan as well. And another interesting thing I just really thought of when they were speaking about the UFOs over Lake Michigan has kind of diminished. Back in February of this year, in 2017, I'm pretty sure it probably didn't make national news, but one of the cop cars, the dashboards, it actually captured a meteorite falling into Lake Michigan. And they They weren't really sure where it fell, but they were estimating it was somewhere probably like around northern Lake Michigan. But that was kind of an interesting thing because meteorite sightings are not very common here. And I just literally thought about that a couple minutes ago. So it really seems like it's all focusing on these waterways and major waterways, because all these locations, they're different. They're different cultures, they're different neighborhoods. Some are very high traffic with tourists and some are very low traffic. So there's not really a connection in that aspect.
What do you think's going on there with the Water Association?
I don't know if it's just a place to travel along to the city easily. The Calumet Park area, there's some forest preserves that you could easily hide in. And then by the International Produce Market, where one of the sightings occurred not too long ago, that's more of an industrial area, but there's a lot of vacant buildings and silos over there that are not used. So, traveling the waterways, you could pretty much get anywhere you want in Chicago really easily. And then you'll always go back to one central location, which is Lake Michigan. So I don't know if that's kind of feeding the energy with this being or multiple beings. I'm not sure.
Well, Lon, you have seen a lot of these kinds of sightings over the years, and including waves. And have you seen any association with water, large bodies of water, rivers, things like that?
Well, this flap, I compare this flap, and in fact, I don't know of any other group of sightings that have been this large since Point Pleasant back in 66, 67.
So we've got a real major wave on our hands.
Yeah, this is huge. And of course, there have been a lot of people that associate the Silver Bridge collapse with the Mothman sightings, a harbinger of a disaster or such. I don't know if that's what's going on here, but it does seem awful strange that it has been around a lot of the waterways where there are bridges. Now, I'm not saying that there's going to be anything as far as bridges collapsing or something major going on, but I just got a sneaking suspicion this is some type of warning of some type. I do believe, as I do believe with the Mothman sightings in Point Pleasant and other sightings I've received over the years of similar type beings, I do believe that these are flesh and blood, but I do believe they come from another dimension. Mm-hmm. Hence me stating the flashes of light south of the city. I have had other beings, not only flying humanoids or flying entities, but flashes of light have been associated with a lot of these sightings and encounters. So I don't know if there's an association or not, but like Nicole stated, the UFO activity, the normal UFO activity in Chicago and Lake Michigan has really waned off, and it's it's just another aspect to this that seems interesting.
Well, it is, and it's an ongoing connection. And I want to follow this thread a bit with, are these things harbingers of something? And we do have a question from the chat room along those lines. Are they possibly harbingers of some calamity? Just like you mentioned, Lon, the Point Pleasant bridge collapse back in 1967. Now, Nicole, one of the things you had considered was a link to a rise in crime. What's going on there?
Yes. I don't know if it's really on the national news, but Chicago in the last couple of years, the crime rate has really gone up. I was looking up some numbers today, and last year was the highest murder rate had been in 20 years. There was 762 murders last year, 3,500 shootings, and this year it's kind of been the same, unfortunately. There's been a lot of shootings, murders. I don't have the exact statistics, but there's really been a rise in crime over the last couple of years, with last year being a horrible year. So could that negative energy, again, could that feed, could they feed off of that? Are they attracted to that? I mean, that's another possibility.
Is there any sense of foreboding around these sightings and a buildup in tension that might lead to more violence?
I've, the witnesses, for the most part, had some sense of foreboding, terror or some type of terror when they saw this, not only because of seeing it, but afterwards. As part of my investigation, I have talked to several psychics, some I've known for a while, and some that actually contacted me. One psychic in particular was involved with the case down in Orlando. Kaylee, what was her last? I forget what her last name was, but she was involved with the investigation of the girl that went missing, and her body was eventually found. Well, anyway, she's actually working other cases now, but she called me and told me that she has a sense of some type of calamity related to an earthquake. Now, I know the Madrid fault is south of Chicago. I don't know how far this fault will extend into Lake Michigan, or into the Chicago area. Had another person mention something about a fault slippage in the lake causing a tsunami. I've been getting a lot of different opinions of this from people who are psychic. Who are psychic or intuitive, and this earthquake thing keeps coming up. I don't know how accurate this is, but it's a bit disconcerting. I don't want to start going out and rattling the cage to say something is going to happen in Chicago, some type of disaster, but I have found it interesting that people are contacting me and telling me this.
That is interesting, and so many connections with forebodings and disasters with the appearance of these things. Nicole, is Chicago prone to earthquakes?
We do. There is a fault in southern Illinois near St. Louis, but there was a huge earthquake. I don't know the exact year, 1800s, that they said it did reach from like St. Louis up until Chicago, and it would have had catastrophic effects if there was a lot of people living in the area. But honestly, we did have a mild earthquake. This was when I was back in college. So this was maybe about 10 years ago, about 60 miles southwest of Chicago, but it was very mild. But I actually woke up during the middle of the night because my bed was shaking, and I just thought it was like a low plane because I live near an airport. So it is a potential possibility. It's just I never really would have thought about that, but it's not on an active fault like in California, but there still is a fault in southern Illinois that could potentially, if it was strong enough, have some repercussions in Chicago.
Might be something to start keeping an eye on. Now, we just heard from Lon a few minutes ago, his thoughts that these are flesh and blood creatures that come from another dimension. What do you think they are?
I'm not sure. I almost think of like a supernatural sort. Just the thing that gets to me is if it was more of the flesh and blood, why has it not been able to be captured on cameras and video more? These are such high traffic locations, so I just don't know if it's more of like, I tend to look like the ghostly type things, more of a spirit or an apparition. And it's just an odd occurrence that's been in Chicago because the Mothman and those prophecies they're not really well known in Chicago. It's not really a common legend. I've actually had several friends ask me today, like, oh, what is the Mothman? So for all these sightings in all these areas over the last month or so, it is very strange. So I almost think it could be more of an apparition type, that it could come and go and disappear, than more of a flesh and blood. But again, it's very strange.
Lon, you mentioned that this is the biggest wave that we've had since Mothman, 1966 to 67, when the winged humanoid was the center of attention in the Mid-Ohio River Valley. Point Pleasant in particular, along with a major wave of UFO activity and assorted high strangeness. Do you think Mothman is relocated to the Windy City?
I don't know. I do know that over the past month or so, we've received a lot of different flying entity reports, and in fact, the Butler Gargoyle in Butler County, Pennsylvania, that's been seen several times in the last month. That has been going on for about a decade now, but the sightings had kind of slowed up. But apparently, a truck driver tried to avoid hitting one and cause an accident several weeks ago. Then I was told that, in fact, Eric Altman contacted me and told me that he heard that there was another sighting as well. So, this is another flying being that, in Pennsylvania, we do get a lot of strange flying humanoid reports, type of Thunderbird reports. In fact, Stan Gordon mentioned something the other day that he had heard there were some related sightings in the eastern part of the state. So who knows? I mean, I don't know. It just seems like, when these type of things happen, it's interesting when people start reporting it. Now I'm getting a lot of older reports, but it seems that when these things start to be reported and people are opening up about it and starting to talk about what they experienced.
And to kind of go off what Lana was just saying right now is, people have been reporting it a lot. So Al and I have a friend that works at the Chicago headquarters with the police. And we were curious, if there's been all these sightings, have people been calling them into the police? And she was able to run, the times, the days, about what's been going on in the sightings, and there's really been no service calls, meaning there was no police dispatch to any of those locations, as it was happening. But again, people might be embarrassed. They might not want to call the cops if they think they see something because they might think they're getting laughed at. But again, I would think, if there's been a rise in these sightings, people might start calling the authorities to report it. But there's really been nothing in the books so far, according to the police.
Well, people are often reluctant to call law enforcement. That's why they often wind up calling organizations like UFO reporting centers, Mutual UFO Network, Phantoms and Monsters, sources like LON, because they feel a little safer talking about weird things. But Lon, this could be another reason why you're starting to get older reports too, is it's encouraging people to come out and talk about things that they kept under a lid in the past.
Yeah, I think that's correct. I think that's right. I mean, I think people when these type of occurrences happen, just like with UFOs, I have noticed when a certain area gets a large flap of UFOs, sightings everywhere start to pick up.
And we have another question from the chat room. Didn't the Mothman disappear after the bridge collapse? And that is true for the Mid-Ohio River Valley in mid-December 1967. The anniversary is coming up this year. And the Mothman Festival in September, third weekend in September, Point Pleasant. My husband Joe and I are there every year, and we're going to have another record crowd this year. But yes, after the Silver Bridge spanning the Ohio River collapsed and over 40 people died in that, sightings of Mothman just disappeared, and a lot of the UFO activity. It's almost like whatever opening between dimensions, and I agree with you, Lon, I think these things come from other dimensions. It's like the energy was consumed, and it sort of swallowed itself up. The opening swallowed itself up, and that was it. Not that there was a cessation in activity, but the whole wave sort of came to an end. Now, we're in a lull here in Chicago. The 10 days ago, the last sighting. Do either of you think this is over, or are we just in a lull? What do you think, Nicole?
I think we're just in a lull because it seems like, and I hate to be negative, but it seems like there is something major that's going to happen. And what it is, nobody knows. So I think this is a lull to something that's going to happen. What it is, I don't know. I hope it's nothing major because I live in the city, but I don't think this is the last that we've seen of these creatures.
Lon, if these things are coming from other dimensions, are they really warning us, or are they coming to feed off the negative energy of something bad happening?
Well, in the case of Chicago, I guess you could make that argument because, like Nicole stated, all the violence that has been going on in the city. I don't really know if that has anything to do with it, but I believe it may actually be some type of warning. You know, I've been getting these Mothman type reports for years, and it does seem to show up show itself to people that do experience something unusual later on. I don't know. I mean, I'm hoping nothing happens, but you know, I think, like you said, I think it's just a lull as well. I think the summer may very well be active, very active, and we'll just have to wait and see.
I think that my own personal thoughts on these winged humanoids is that at least some of them might be coming in advance of something negative happening on a major scale, that this is energy they consume. And I do see this in a lot of negative entity encounters where the intent seems to be to instill fear in people so that there's an adrenaline rush, because when we're afraid, we throw off a lot of adrenaline energy. And I've always believed that these negative beings vampirize that and make use of it. And it is kind of a chilling thought to think that, well, maybe something is ramping up here. And so we're having a wave of these flying humanoids, kind of like vultures coming to, be present so that they can take advantage of it. Nicole, I think you've got your work cut out for you for the next few weeks to, really keep an eye on the sightings and see if any new patterns emerge. Lon, how should we regard these entities? Is there anything human about them, even though they have humanoid shapes? Are they shapeshifters? Are we seeing their true form?
I don't know. You know, I do believe there are more than one that have been showing up. I do believe they can change their appearance to a point. I also believe that there are certain people that can see it and there are others that can't. I mean, it's almost like, someone being intuitive and being able to pick up spirit energy. I think it's kind of the same thing with this thing. It just seems to me that certain people are allowed to see it, and beyond that, it is just not going on, So, if there's a connection between the witnesses or the locations, if it is, I haven't been able to figure it out yet.
Nicole, we know that Chicago is one haunted city. There's probably more hauntings in Chicago per square foot than a lot of other cities. And a lot of strange things go on there. Is this all part of a syndrome of just high strangeness that happens all the time there?
No, I don't think so. Because there is a lot of haunted locations in Chicago, but it seems like the haunted locations, the hauntings kind of stick in that area. I mean, there's like, if you ever heard of Bachelor's Grove, and there's along Archer Avenue, there's a lot of haunted things, but this is just really unusual. And when I looked at Mr. Strickler's website, just the number of sightings and all the different locations, it just doesn't add up. So this to me is something on a bigger scale. And again, what it is, I don't know, but I don't think it's related to how Chicago is a very haunted city anyway. This is something kind of different, I think.
So a new wrinkle in the supernatural history of Chicago. I think that we need to keep an eye on the skies here. And we're in the closing minutes of the show. Lon, I wanted to ask you one thing, because you emphasized over and over again how credible these witnesses were. And do you find that to be the case when people are reporting these bizarre events? Are most witnesses on the up and up and not tricksters?
I think most people who take the time to contact me saw something or believe they saw something. These witnesses in particular, they're kind of unflappable, and they, I just got the sense when talking to them that they really did see something. So these were some of the better witnesses that I've ever had, to be quite honest with you.
Well, this is literally history unfolding here in Chicago with this wave of sightings. As Lon Strickler mentioned, the largest wave of flying humanoid sightings we have had since the mid-1960s, since the Mothman flap. So we may be seeing a version of the Mothman Festival springing up in Chicago. I'll give you an idea there, Nicole. Okay, we're at the end of our first hour, and I want to thank Lon Strickler, the publisher of phantomsandmonsters.com blog. Do subscribe. And you see anything strange in the skies anywhere, not just Chicago, but anywhere, send it in to Lon. And Nicole, Tito, Graycheck, I want to thank you for adding your insights to what's happening there in Chicago. Ghostly-voices.com, Nicole's website. Thank you both for joining me. The first hour of Strange Dimensions on KGRA Radio. And we're going to be right back in just a few moments with Ken Gearhart and Terry Rowe.
Okay, nurse, let's get this man to the ER stat.
Right away, doctor.
We see this every day. Heart attack or angina pain due to blocked and clogged arteries. Chelation can remove obstructions or blockages from arteries and help avoid painful and expensive surgery. Now there's Angioprim. It's a liquid oral chelation product that you take with juice. You start to feel the results fast. Angioprim increases blood flow all over the body, and that means more energy and strength to take on the day with less aches and pains. 60 years of research has gone into chelation, and Angioprim is the result. A safe and easy way to unblock your veins and arteries from buildup that slow circulation.
Paging Dr. Jones. Please report to the emergency room right away.
Log on now for a special radio offer from Angioprim. That's angioprim.com/radio. ANGIOPRIM. Angioprim.com/radio or call 877-882-7221. That's 877-882-7221.
It's Thursday night and you're grabbing drinks with some friends. Start it off with a pitcher for the table, which quickly becomes two. There's pool. And there's the photo booth.
All right, everybody squeeze in. Say cheese.
Followed naturally by an order of wings. And another.
Can we get some extra ranch sauce?
Then there's the ceremonial nightcap.
So what are we doing this weekend?
And lastly, it's back to the car, which, if you're buzzed, could be the most expensive night of your life. Getting pulled over for buzzed driving could cost you around $10,000 in fines, legal fees, and increased insurance rates. Nothing kills a buzz like getting pulled over for buzzed driving, because buzzed driving is drunk driving. Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
Around the world for decades have come high strangeness reports of mysterious aerial lights, beams, animal mutilations, human abductions, secret space and military programs focused on an alien presence. One reporter of these Earth mysteries is Emmy Award-winning TV producer, writer, and editor Linda Moulton Howe. She reports and edits the science, environment, and real X-Files news website, earthfiles.com.
We are moving from the paradigm that we are alone in the universe to a new one in which we are not alone. And something out there is interacting with us, our animals and plant life, forcing glimpses of other realities upon us.
Linda has produced 4 large books about these phenomena with hundreds of color images and illustrations that reviewers such as New York Times best-selling author Jim Marrs describes as an amazing accumulation of evidence. All her books, An Alien Harvest, the 2-volume Glimpses of Other Realities, and Mysterious Lights and Crop Circles, along with documentaries, are available in the shop at earthfiles.com.
Every 2 seconds, someone needs blood. Whether it's a natural disaster or one single child suffering from illness, the American Red Cross stands ready to supply blood when it's most needed. But blood is a perishable product. Therefore, it must continuously be replenished. You can safely donate blood every 56 days. The need is constant and patients are waiting. Call your American Red Cross at 1-800-GIVE-LIFE to schedule your life-saving appointment. Please give blood today. Patients are depending on you.
Mainstream media's most wanted. KGRAradio.com.
Welcome back to the second hour of Strange Dimensions Radio. We've been having an intriguing, intense evening tonight examining the wave of flying humanoid sightings that have occurred in the Chicago area since early this spring. Over a dozen sightings, and probably more that haven't been reported. And some of these sightings do go back several years, but flying humanoids have been with us for a very long time. And joining me in this second hour is one of the best-known experts on mysterious creature research and a cryptozoologist, Ken Gerhard. And Ken's been on the show before. We had a fabulous show last year. You can listen to it in the free archives at kgraradio.com, so do check it out. Ken is a widely recognized cryptozoologist and author. He's been featured on many television programs. He was co-host of the History Channel series Missing in Alaska. He has literally traveled the world searching for evidence of mysterious creatures and beasts. He's looked for Sasquatch, the Loch Ness Monster, the Chupacabra, flying creatures of all kinds, even werewolves. He's written a number of books, A Menagerie of Mysterious Beasts and Encounters with Flying Humanoids, among them, the last one being very appropriate for our topic tonight. So I am so delighted to have Ken Gerhard back on the show to look at this intriguing wave developing tonight. And we're also going to hear from an experiencer a little later on. Paranormal investigator Terry Rowe from Kansas is going to join us and talk about some of his bizarre events. Ken, welcome to the show.
Good evening, Rosemary. And as always, it's absolutely an honor and quite honestly a pleasure to be here with you on your show.
Well, thank you so much, and likewise. I've been reading your very interesting posts on Facebook from the San Antonio Zoo, and including a photograph that you posted recently of a very rare kind of cat. Looks kind of like a large jungle cat of some sort. And, it's just another piece of evidence that there may be all kinds of natural species that we don't even know about on this planet that we're kind of rediscovering. And does that ever get mixed in with some of these waves of what we think are mysterious creatures? So how does a cryptozoologist approach something like this wave of flying humanoids in Chicago?
Yes. Well, first off, the foundation of cryptozoology, which is based on traditional zoology science, is really given fuel by the fact that about 5,000 new species are described every year. Now, most of those admittedly are very small or live deep in the ocean, but we do occasionally, scientists discover something large and remarkable living in some remote area of our planet. And so that kind of gives us a lot of hope. But there's kind of a traditional cryptozoologist, if you will, and I perhaps am in that category. Cryptozoology was founded by actual zoologists back in the 1950s and 60s who began to explore a lot of these mysterious animals. But it has, like many things, cryptozoology has evolved through the years. And beginning in the weird 60s and 70s, cryptozoologists began to drift, or perhaps were dragged more into remarkable accounts of really weird creatures that don't seem to have a solid basis or foundation in traditional science. Things that have just really fascinating characteristics, humanoid-type creatures that are mixed with other types of things. And there is a term, zooform, which a group I belong to, the Center for Fortean Zoology, uses to describe some of these winged humanoids and dogman and some of these other creatures. Zooform implying that you have something that has the characteristics of an animal, but it just doesn't quite fit in terms of the fossil history and what we know of the natural world. So many cryptozoologists, including myself, have kind of forayed into some of these weird investigations because it is a valid phenomenon. People are experiencing something, and we really don't have a solid explanation as far as what it is they are seeing or encountering.
Well, there are a couple of statements in your book, Encounters with Flying Humanoids, that really jumped out at me. And this is such an excellent survey of the history of flying, not only flying humanoids, but related things like certainly Mothman, gargoyles, winged beasts of all kinds, man birds. And you said that cryptozoology aims to place their subjects into neat and tidy categories by classifying them within the accepted taxonomic system. And then with regard to something like flying humanoids, we are treading dangerously far beyond the accepted laws of evolution and the natural world. And that seems to be the situation we're in tonight, trying to examine this wave going on in Chicago.
Yes, absolutely. So I've read, of course, the reports. Lon Strickler has been gracious enough to keep me in the loop, and often thinks of me when he's got a report of a flying creature. So, what's interesting about the flying humanoid phenomenon, and as you suggested, it goes back literally thousands of years. If you look at the mythologies and folklore of the ancient Assyrians, Babylonians, ancient Greece, some European cultures, and around the world, really, the Maya and, different cultures, the Hindu, had stories or myths about winged human-like creatures, and they were often viewed as sort of demigods, visitors from above, and either imparting great knowledge, or sometimes they were interpreted as being omens of, very bad events to come. So you have this long history, but moreover, in modern times, and I've been blessed to interview many eyewitnesses of flying humanoids throughout my research. I'm still contacted by people on a regular basis, like Lon. And, you can't get past the credibility and the sincerity of people when you're witnessing them, when you're interviewing them about these experiences. These are very traumatic, very profound experiences and very real to these people. And so you can't easily explain them away. Now, in terms of the Chicago sightings, one thing, of course, I'm noticing is slight, and this is throughout, the flying humanoid phenomenon, you have frustratingly inconsistent descriptions in terms of what people describe. For example, in the Chicago cases, some people said the eyes glowed red, Some people said they were orange. Some people said they were yellow. Some people said the wings were bat-like or owl-like. And now certainly you can explain some of that away, due to the fact that people are essentially in very, very strange situations that are treading dangerously on the fabric of their realities. So, people are obviously, you can imagine seeing something like this. Your adrenaline's pumping. You can't put it into context. Here's something stepping right out of a monster movie right into reality. So, and people often have just fleeting glimpses of these things. So there's certainly, you can explain some of that. But flying humanoids around the world, and you have things like the Mothman of West Virginia, the Owlman in England, the Tengu of Japan, flying humanoids in Mexico that I've investigated. The descriptions are always very different in terms of the size, the wingspan, what the wings look like, what the features look like. And so, as a traditional cryptozoologist, that is frustrating because you can't place it neatly into a taxonomic situation. You can't say, well, we have 2 types or 3 types or, even 4 types. There's so many different descriptions of these creatures. Now, I don't think that invalidates the phenomenon, so there is definitely something going on and has been going on for millennia.
What do you think these entities or creatures are?
Well, I would start by, first of all, eliminating, as I always do in an investigation, by eliminating the obvious and, the more mundane and pragmatic explanations. So if I were going to approach this from a case of misidentification as an assumption, I don't think you can, it's kind of insulting when some skeptics say, well, people are just seeing owls. The Mothman was an owl, and people were blowing it all out of proportion. Well, we've all seen owls. We've all seen lots of owls throughout the course of our lives. Owls can be darn big. They have a 5-foot wingspan sometimes, but, that's not, as bizarre and huge and monstrous as what people are describing. So I don't think people are simply seeing owls or any known species, large birds and so forth. So if you eliminate misidentifications of known animals, then you can say, okay, well, what about an unknown animal, something that hasn't been documented by science? And for the past 13 years, I have compiled hundreds of eyewitness accounts of giant flying creatures, either giant birds or some people describe things that look like prehistoric pterosaurs, flying reptiles with leathery bat-like wings. Some people describe these Mothman humanoid type creatures. So, what could this be something that science hasn't discovered? Could it be something from our fossil history? And certainly there were giant birds that had an 18-foot wingspan about 10,000 years ago. There were giant reptiles that had a 40-foot wingspan, but that was 64 million years ago. So what are the odds that something like that is still around? And could that be interpreted as a flying humanoid? We don't know since we haven't seen these things in the flesh. So those are kind of the more pragmatic explanations. But, certainly the thing you have to look at is the fact that people have described these things very specifically as looking humanoid. And, having human-like features, arms, a human-like face with bat-like wings or with sturdy human-like legs. Now, why is that a problem? Well, evolution doesn't back that up in any way, shape, or form. There is no branch that we know of in our fossil history that would indicate that a humanoid or human-like form could have grown wings or sprouted wings. There are no flying creatures, habitually flying creatures like birds or anything else that look very human-like, in my opinion at least. So now you've got this kind of zooform situation where you have things that have characteristics of humans and animals mixed together. And so then it becomes, unfortunately, slightly quasi-scientific because you can't neatly explain it. So now we're getting more into, of course, spectral and supernatural suggestions. Are these things not of this earth? And people can interpret that as different, in different ways. Some people will refer to these things as extraterrestrial or interdimensional or demonic. Those are all kind of different interpretations of something that is from another realm that is coming into our realm or reality from somewhere else. And then finally, then you have the possibility that these things are manifestations of energy, some type of spirit form phenomenon, and that they are capable of taking a physical form and appearing physical to us. And that certainly would explain why they, look different, to different people. Maybe they're either interpreted differently, or these are so-called shapeshifters that take different forms depending on who is observing them. Or perhaps they are related to our deep psyche, to our subconscious. And now you can get into all kinds of Jungian philosophy and stuff. But if we are all connected, if we have been connected as a species for thousands and millions of years, and we share common psychological conditions and common memories and beliefs and things like that, maybe we are somehow projecting these things into our reality from the power of our minds.
It could be all of the above, too, that we might be dealing with a number of explanations, and that might account for some of these differences that we see. There are consistencies, and yet there are these odd differences, just like you said, Ken, that defy categorization, that you can't put them into neat little boxes like we can other things. Do you think they're intelligent and they have a purpose for terrorizing people or manifesting and being seen?
Well, certainly wild speculation on my part to say so, but yes, in my book, Flying with Flying Humanoids, I did find one common thread throughout many accounts, and that is that people are utterly terrified by these winged humanoids. Perhaps that's not so hard to misunderstand when you're talking about a monstrous-looking thing that doesn't make any sense to us. But moreover, the behavior of these things. And people, when they see these flying humanoids, are often chased. That was the case with the Mothman, which was often seen chasing cars, popping up out of the darkness and startling people, following people. And also, there is a belief that these things are associated with death and illness and, as I said before, cataclysmic events like the Silver Bridge collapse. So certainly there's a sense of impending doom. So these things are definitely geared towards our emotional reactions to them. They seem to be drawn to fear, to terror, and they seem to feed off of that. That's at least how it seems if you look at the body of evidence.
One of the things we were discussing in the first hour of the show was a feeling that many people have that they're harbingers of doom. And we certainly see that connection in the Mothman wave, as you know, that Mothman has been called a harbinger of doom about the bridge collapse. And could they be here to be part of an advance wave, or maybe not to warn us, but maybe to participate in something bad that's going to happen?
Yes, and there is, beyond Mothman, there's a mythological or folkloric component to that belief as well. Because, for example, you have, going back again to Pazuzu. Pazuzu was an ancient Sumerian demon, probably best known from the Exorcist books and movies, but Pazuzu was a winged humanoid type creature and was perceived as a, bringer of destruction and famine and disease and so forth. So people certainly didn't want to encounter the Pazuzu. Camazotz, the death bat in Maya mythology. The Tengu of Japan is kind of a forest spirit, a winged birdman type creature that is often a harbinger of bad events. In Scotland, you have the Scree, and there are actually accounts from the 1800s of this winged humanoid creature in Scotland flying over a battlefield before hundreds of soldiers, Jacobite soldiers, were slaughtered, and also flying over a train before it wrecked and hundreds of people lost their lives. So again, you have this long-standing tradition. And moreover, if you look at a lot of Native American mythologies and folklores, owls. And again, there seems to be a tie-in with owls from time to time with these flying humanoids because of the large eyes and the large size and the nocturnal nature. But owls are considered to be, in Native American and also in Spanish Mexican American and Latin culture, omens that, someone in the family is going to die, or there's an impending illness or something along those lines.
You've got an account in your book, Encounters with Flying Humanoids, about a soldier in Vietnam, I think it was Da Nang, who tried to shoot at a flying humanoid, and the bullets just had no effect on it.
Yes, and that's another commonality, is you have many accounts of flying humanoids over military installations, military bases, and so forth. And, even the TNT area in where the Mothman was seen many times near Point Pleasant, that was a place where they were building munitions for World War II, explosives, and making implements of destruction. So, again, there's kind of just that negative energy, that negative connotation to these flying humanoids, that they are somehow associated with foreboding doom.
Have you encountered in your research any connection with major bodies of water, which seems to be a factor in the Chicago sightings? And then I am reminded also about Point Pleasant, West Virginia, which is at the confluence of two rivers, and that TNT plant you just mentioned right along one of those rivers. Is there some energy involved with water that might attract these things?
Well, not to be terse, but 73% or 77% of our planet is water. So there is water everywhere. But you're right. There do seem to be, just as with paranormal activity oftentimes, and also, in the field of cryptozoology. Now, again, from a traditional cryptozoological sense, you could say that, all animals are drawn to water because they have to drink water. But there are certain bodies of water, and we have a very high concentration of flying humanoid accounts. They do come from all over, but we have a very high concentration of them specifically in the Midwest and around the Great Lakes area. You have the recent sightings from Chicago, other sightings from Milwaukee very recently. I've been talking to a researcher up there, and those, seem to jibe with some of the Chicago sightings. Then you have Point Pleasant, as you said, Ohio, traditionally a lot of sightings, Pennsylvania, and these are all states that sort of border the Great Lakes, and there are many rivers up in those areas too. So yes, there does seem to be a connection as well with water and these beings.
I have often wondered if there was some sort of subtle energy generated by large bodies of water or large rivers, for example, that might be useful in terms of manifestation to some of these beings. I believe them to be interdimensional, that they are coming from somewhere else and penetrating our reality. So we're just about ready to take our bottom of the hour break, but I do have a question from the chat that I'd like to get in. X-Lady wants to know what you think of giant birds like thunderbirds, and I'm going to add to that, is there any connection between thunderbirds and what we're talking about tonight?
Oh, that's a great question. Illinois, the state of Illinois, traditionally has been a hotbed of activity for sightings of giant birds. These date back to the 1940s. There was another flap in the 1970s. A young boy was actually picked up by a giant bird in front of 7 witnesses in Lawndale, Illinois in 1977. But very recently, and I write about this in my new book, A Menagerie of Mysterious Beasts, I've been contacted by several people that have had sightings of thunderbirds in Illinois, and specifically in northern Illinois. There was a gentleman named Walter Bednarik who had a sighting just outside of Chicago in the suburb of Brookfield back in 1976. Very vivid description of a giant bird with, an 8-foot body and a huge wingspan, 15 to 20 feet across. Very recently, there was a woman also, Naperville, Illinois, and I write about that in my book. Her name is escaping me, unfortunately, at the moment, but very recent sighting from 2013. So yes, there could potentially be a connection between these sightings of enormous, massive birds, thunderbirds, and perhaps some of these sightings of weird winged creatures around Chicago.
Now, in some of those giant bird cases, they acted out aggressively against people. And do we have that with the flying humanoids, or does the terror come from just seeing something that's strange and horrific?
No physical contact that I'm aware of. So, I mean, in the Thunderbird case, you do have I have a couple of accounts, maybe a few accounts of people, of these birds swooping down and trying to pick people up, or actually making contact and scratching people. But in terms of the flying humanoids, I'm not aware of an account where someone claimed that this thing actually physically touched them, tried to pick them up, or so forth. So that is again a weird part of the mystery. Is these things seem perfectly capable of physically confronting us if they want to. I mean, they're incredibly huge and fast and so forth. But I'm not aware of that occurring.
Do you have any theory as to why they have a humanoid shape? I mean, let's posit that they might be shapeshifters from another realm. What is the connection there with the humanoid shape? Are they mocking us, imitating us?
That's a great point. Well, to quote a famous poet, and I probably can't think of that name right now either, but, there's nothing more terrifying to us than the face of man, or something that is not quite human, almost but not quite human. So if you think about that, anything that looks like us or similar to us, but that we immediately recognize as not of our species, that's a pretty terrifying, just completely unnerving feeling, because it kind of, it rattles many aspects of our foundation and what we believe, whether you're a spiritual person or a science person or whatever. We are kind of the apex species on our planet. But now suddenly we're being challenged by something that looks like us. But you bring up a great point as well. Maybe it's a reflection of some kind. And again, if these things are manifestations of energy, maybe they're choosing a specific form that we will relate to.
You've just reminded me of something, Ken, and then we've got to move into the break, but there's a term for that, and I've forgotten the term, but it applies in the whole phantom clown syndrome as well. That one of the reasons why people are so afraid of clowns is that they're like us, but they're not like us. There's something strange and very liminal, uncertain about the evil clown or the phantom clown or just clowns in general. And that might be the same psychological mindset with that kicks in with these humanoid shapes. All right, we are at the bottom of our second hour. We've got to take a break for a few moments. When we come back, Ken is going to still be with us. Go to his website, kengerhard.com, for more information about his appearances and books. We'll also be talking to Kansas paranormal investigator Terry Rowe about his weird experiences in the woods, and we'll get some more insights on what's going on with the flying humanoids. Stay with us. We'll be right back. You're listening to KGRAradio.com.
So you went to dinner last night, you had your favorite pasta. Ugh. Or maybe you had a heavy, spicy meal and it left you. Ugh. Get the tea.com. Maybe you mowed down a huge steak and your plumbing is all plugged. Ugh. Get the tea.com. Our super strength tea will take care of your occasional. Ugh. It's all organic and non-GMO. Get rid of. Ugh. We have so many great supplements, but our super tea is number one. Get the tea.com. That's getthetea.com.
KGRAradio.com is your conference connection station.
Hi, this is Ray Hobbs with KGRA Radio calling for Kendra.
This is Kendra.
Kendra, recently you went to KGRAradio.com and clicked on the contest tab and registered to win a cruise. Is that right?
You bet I did.
Kendra, you're a winner.
No, you're kidding. Are you serious?
Kendra, you and a guest will enjoy 7 days and nights aboard the beautiful Norwegian breakaway cruise ship as you depart from New York City, headed for the fabulous Bermuda Islands.
Wow, Ray.
You and your guest are going to get the KGRA VIP experience with a private cocktail reception with all the speakers. You're going to get VIP passes for all the lectures, presentations, panels, Q&A sessions.
Wow.
You're going to get dinner with keynote speaker Eric Von Daniken, Nick Redfern, and Micah Hanks at sea.
It's amazing. Oh, man. I can't even believe it. That's so exciting.
Also included are 2 exclusive shore excursions with speakers on the gorgeous Sunset Catamaran Cruise, and you're going to get to see another side of Bermuda's nightlife aboard the glass-bottom boat on the beautiful Twilight Cruise, and a whole lot more. What do you think, Kendra?
Oh, my gosh. I don't even believe this. I never win anything. This is amazing, Ray. I love KGRA.
All of this is provided by your friends at Holiday Maker Travel, Kendra, and KGRA Radio, valued at over $3,000. You're a winner.
It's amazing.
Kendra, who is your contact for the best UFO paranormal talk radio on the planet, sweetheart?
KGRAradio.com.
There are many sounds in your day-to-day life. There are sounds that wake you up. Sounds that make you smile. Sounds that energize you. And sounds that help you relax. But there are some sounds that can alert you to danger and can help save lives. Wireless emergency alerts, now on many mobile devices, use a unique sound and vibration to bring you information about severe weather events, Amber Alerts, or other emergencies in your area. With critical information from local sources you know and trust, you can be in the know, wherever you are. For more information, visit ready.gov/alerts. Brought to you by FEMA and the Ad Council.
For the thousands of wounded warriors returning from battle, Wounded Warrior Project has developed the Warriors to Work program, a career counseling service that helps wounded warriors translate their military experience to a civilian job. These extraordinary men and women bring more than just teamwork and inspiration to the workplace. They bring proven world-class job skills. And to ensure proper placement, Wounded Warrior Project works with employers to find just the right job fit. Talented, skilled, and eager to get back to work, you have the opportunity to hire a seasoned veteran. Contact Wounded Warrior Project at findwwp.org. Welcome home the brave.
You listen to us, and we listen to you. And so does the CIA. KGRAradio.com.
Welcome back, everyone, to the final half hour of Strange Dimensions Radio. Tonight, the flying humanoids and the wave going on over Chicago. In the first hour, we heard from Lon Strickler, the publisher of phantomsandmonsters.com blog. And Lon said this is the biggest wave of flying humanoids since Mothman in the mid-'60s. So definitely something afoot in the Chicago area. We've been talking the second hour with cryptozoologist and cryptid researcher Ken Gerhard about the phenomenon as a whole. And I just want to add this note because right before the break, we were talking about what is it that these things, whatever they are, and I think they are from an alternate reality, perhaps shapeshifters, that they have this part humanoid form. Is it intended to scare us, or is that part of their real form? And we were discussing about how this weird concoction of characteristics, not human, not quite human, might evoke a particular fear reaction in people. And there is a term now for that, and I have retrieved it. It's called the uncanny valley. And I came across it while I was researching the whole phantom clown thing and why people are afraid of clowns. It's a bona fide fear called coulrophobia. But the psychologists call this response to human but not human, the uncanny valley. And this was coined in the 70s to describe the unsettled feelings and revulsion toward robots that look nearly but not quite human. They're uncanny, so they cause reactions of uncertainty and even fear. And so it is with clowns because they don't look completely human, and so it is with these humanoid creatures that are flying through our skies. Ken, what's your response to that?
Yeah, that is interesting. The other interpretation perhaps would be that, we were talking about how these creatures, whatever they are, seem to want to evoke a reaction from us. And, what is going to push our theoretical button more than appearing to us, in a form that we can relate to, but not enough to embrace, more like just a revolted rejection of something that is an abomination, really, combining human-like characteristics with an animal. And I think that also hits us on another level, which is, we have these primordial instincts that date back, 2 million years or whatever, that, we are essentially, fearful of animals. And we also look at our primordial past and feel like a strange connection in some ways to an earlier time when we were lower on the food chain. And what are some of the things that probably preyed on us when we were not as sophisticated as we are now? And some of those things were, in fact, giant birds, giant raptors. Some of the famous pre-human fossils, like the Tong child, they've actually figured out was killed by some type of giant eagle. Its skull was broken in such a way that something had swooped down from the sky and crushed its skull with its talons. Combining an animal that preyed on us, thousands and millions of years ago with something that looks like us, that is a very threatening image.
You've seen a lot of waves of these flying humanoid entities. You've researched them throughout history. The one going on in Chicago, is it really the biggest we've had since Mothman?
Quite possibly, yes. My database is full of flying humanoid encounters, and I do have eyewitnesses reach out to me on a regular basis. But they're usually pretty spread out in terms of geography. So to have a concentration like this, and especially in a major city like Chicago, that is pretty significant.
Well, joining us tonight is a paranormal investigator in Kansas, Terry Rowe. And Terry contacted me recently about some experiences that he and one of his sons had with some very unusual creatures. Terry, thank you for joining us tonight.
Hi, Rosemary. Hi, Ken. Good to join you guys.
Hey, Terry.
So could you tell us all what happened first to your son and then to the experience that you had? Because it all fits in this category with these winged creatures.
Yeah, it began, we live in northwest Kansas. It's a pretty remote area. And we live on a farm that has a lot of acreage. And on this farm, there's a barn. And my youngest son was out one day. He was about 3 years old, 2 to 3. He was right in the age where he was starting to talk really well. And he encountered a creature that was out in the woods behind this barn. And he came in and told me the story about what he had seen. And it kind of shocked me because, here I am, a paranormal investigator, and my youngest son is coming in telling me this story. And as an investigator, I'm very careful about what I speak about and stuff in front of the younger kids because I don't want them to be scared because there's some pretty scary topics. So I was very shocked when I started hearing his story. He said that he had seen a goat-looking type creature behind the barn and that it had horns, and its name was Tommy Izzes. He had a name for it. And this thing was talking to him, but not with his mouth. He was like using telepathy. And said he wanted him to come into the woods with him and play. And of course, my son was freaked out because he's never seen anything like this before, and said no, and came and told me what he had seen. And went out there. I went out there. I didn't see anything. And so I started asking him just simple questions like, well, where do you think he lives? And he said, well, he told me that he lives in the hollow trees in the woods and that he lives there with his mother. And he goes, but he's very angry now and because I told you and he has to move away. So I was like, well, okay, interesting. And put that in my book of stories. And, you know, because I interview people all the time and thought it was very interesting. Wouldn't let him play behind the barn anymore. But we do live near a reservoir. It's called Webster Reservoir. It's in Rooks County. And we also live in the Solomon Valley. So many years, this was in 2008 when all this happened. And so many years rolled by, and I do paranormal tours at some haunted locations here in Kansas. And my focus is mostly on the ghost-type paranormal stuff. I do get into cryptozoology and ufology, but my main focus is the paranormal ghost hunting type stuff. And so I run some tours here in Kansas and just to make some money for research and stuff. And one night I was coming home very late. It was in March. It was March 5th of 2016. And it was like 1 o'clock in the morning. And I had told my wife and my son to stay awake and watch for deer because we have a lot of deer problems here in the state. And so I glanced over. I started coming into the valley where we live. And I glance over, and here's my wife is sleeping. I look back, my son's sleeping. And as I turn back to look at the road, I see this creature flying right in front of my truck. And because the headlights had just gone down the hill a little bit going into the valley, and so they were extended up. And this thing was about 20 feet off of the ground. It was about 7.5 feet long, tall. As it, if it was standing up, it would be 7.5 feet. And its wings were probably 12 to 14 foot wide. They looked like bat wings, but it looked like they were covered with like velvet, kind of. Its head was hyperextended and looking straight forward. It wasn't looking down. It was looking straight forward. And it had the features of a man. I mean, it was a naked man flying through the sky. And I couldn't tell whether there was any, male parts showing because it happened so quickly. It probably, the entire experience lasted 6 seconds as the car was going by. And it truly freaked me out to the point where I just couldn't believe what I had just seen. And being in the paranormal world, I've seen a lot of things. I've done lots of counseling with people who were in the demonology sector, seen lots of manifestations, lots of people manifest into different beings and stuff. And this freaked me out more than I've ever been freaked out in my life.
What did you think it was?
A flying man. I mean, that's what it was. I mean, I had no other thoughts than, at first I thought, well, maybe it was a bird. I was like, no, that was a man. It was a naked man flying with bat wings. And I was so freaked out. I could have stopped the car and turned around and went back and looked, and it just never even dawned on me. And of course I'm screaming at everyone in the car, wake up, look out the back window. Look what you're going to see. And, they're all droggy and, didn't see anything. But this sighting was right as there's a Solomon River that runs through the valley, and there's a bridge that goes over it, and it was right before that bridge, and it was an amazing thing to see.
Mm. Ken, this kind of description, how do you as a researcher then fit it into patterns or categories that you've observed?
Well, I was my youngest son is older now. He's 10, And so I wanted to revisit his little incident behind the barn, just throw some questions out to him, not try to lead him on, see if he could remember any details of this creature or whatever. And he pretty much described exactly what I had seen flying. And I thought it was kind of an interesting thing that he got a name for this thing, because we had a psychic here many years ago, because I'm friends with a lot of different types of people, and she had come up with a name, and Ken said it was Pazuzu. Pazuzu, is that how you say it?
Pazuzu, yes.
Pazuzu, and because I'm not really into the demonology, names of all the demons and stuff like that, I just kind of rolled off my back. But as soon as Ken said it, I was like, oh my gosh, that was a name that the psychic had gotten. She said that there was a curse of Pazuzu over this valley, and that no white man would prosper here because of it. And I just kind of put that in as experience, just I always take people's word and just kind of file it backwards. And sometimes when the time is right, it comes forward. But it kind of matched what Ken was saying.
Ken, what are your thoughts on this? This is an interesting connection with Pazuzu here.
Yeah, that is. Well, first off, I want to thank Terry for having the courage to come forward and talk about his experience, and I think we should encourage that, because there are many, many people out there that have probably seen things that they're afraid, just reticent to talk about, but the only way that we're going to ever come to a solution is by having kind of all the evidence, everything out on the table. With regard to your sun sighting, we could certainly, I think all of us in different aspects of supernatural research will acknowledge that young people have different filters than we have as we're older. And certainly in the case of many flying humanoids, for example, the owl man, the mothman, many of the early sightings and prevalent sightings were made by young people, not children, but younger people. So certainly younger people may have abilities to perceive things that are going on around us, that as we get older and we develop these walls and filters that we are not able to perceive. That said, respectfully, the testimony of a very young child from an evidentiary standpoint only, unfortunately, is not very strong, because they don't have the perspective that we have when we're older. That's just my opinion, and that's not to discredit what your son has told you. The fact that it corroborates what you saw, that is interesting. So that has a compelling aspect to it. As far as what you're describing, and again, fully and respectfully, the fact that you are a paranormal researcher and are interested in all of these topics, having to do with unexplained phenomenon, from a purely skeptical point of view, that is a little problematic, as it would be if I saw something or any heroes or anyone else, because we already have a pre-existing interest in weird stuff.
Right. Exactly.
So, it's not quite as compelling as when a police officer who poo-poos everything suddenly has an encounter. And that's not to invalidate your experience, Terry. I'm just, I'm sure you understand where I'm coming from on that.
Yeah, that's why I don't share it a lot, because I know, people are like, oh, well, you just made that up because you probably heard other stories about it. So.
And you sound very sincere. So, I mean, you told that in a very matter-of-fact way. You didn't embellish. You didn't, endow it with all kinds of magical properties. It was basically you saw this thing and that was it, so.
Yeah. One of the figures cited in Chicago was a naked woman. And so here we have a naked man, a winged naked man, and the bat wings so prominent again. And some of these creatures are described as looking like they're covered with fur, either a black fur or gray fur. In fact, Mothman was described by the original eyewitnesses as looking like it was covered with fur. And then we have this velvet description. But I want to throw something out here, and Ken, and get your thoughts on it. Is I do appreciate the skeptical view, and I'm always telling people, go for the natural explanations first. You've got to eliminate those before you can start considering things paranormal. But on the other hand, what about the idea that those of us who are in the field doing this work frequently, wouldn't we be changing our consciousness to kind of tune into things that other people may not readily perceive? So, does that make us more likely to have these experiences than other people?
I think that is a reasonable hypothesis. I mean, there is a validity to it when you break it down like that and you kind of eloquently put it out there. So the other thing I was going to bring up, and just to revisit, if I could for a moment, something I wanted to say, I have interviewed one other paranormal investigator, a woman who was also leading an investigation of a haunted location when she saw a flying humanoid in the woods nearby. That's the only other one I'm aware of, but in some ways that kind of mirrors Terry's experience. So I'm going to throw this back to you as well, Rosemary, and Terry, if you want to comment. What about the possibility that what we're dealing with here is some type of attachment from that particular location taking a physical form? I don't know. If I was as eloquent as you, Rosemary, but could that be an attachment phenomenon?
I'd like to throw that to Terry. What do you think?
Well, I would. The night of the tour was a very strange night. I have to mention the next day my wife left me after 28 years, and we went through a divorce. But that night before, I believe she was dealing with something like possession. When I do a tour, I'm very careful because I have many people on a tour, and they all believe differently. And a lot of them are dabbling into stuff that they don't quite understand. So I always tell everyone, we're going to do this safely. And my wife, she has been on hundreds of these tours with me before. And this night, she was acting very odd. She almost acted like she got taken over because she was saying weird things. She was like asking these whatever we were making contact with, questions like, well, do you like my dress? And do you like how I look? And I was thinking, that is the weirdest thing to say. Why would you teach people to, ask those kind of questions? But anyways, that was just a side note to this. But yeah, I believe that these things are interdimensional and they do have connection with the paranormal. That's why I have a group called the Kansas Researchers of Unexplained Phenomenon, and we do all of the different realms of the paranormal. And because I really believe that they all fit together somehow. And my forte is in frequency. I research everything with frequency, subtle frequency, and regular man-made frequency. And I do know that night there was some really strange things happening in the frequency realm. So I was getting...
And could I add something to that quickly? Which is that, people aren't always aware of this, but in the case of some of the flying humanoid witnesses, for example, Linda Scarberry, the first major Mothman eyewitness, according to John Keel, after her experience, she had all kinds of weird poltergeist activity going on around her house. And Keel actually suggested that she put up crosses and different religious kind of things and cleanse her environment because he felt it was kind of a demonic presence. There were two gentlemen who cited a man-bat type creature in Wisconsin back in 2012. Linda Godfrey investigated this case thoroughly. And these two gentlemen, after they saw this thing, they got home and the same thing. The dog was cowering under the bed. There were loud banging noises around their house. So there's almost like an attachment to some of these sightings.
Uh-huh.
I think that's a very good observation, and I've often wondered if they might be some sort of projection of negative energy that involves a combination of land energy, event energy, even negative human energy. I don't think they come entirely from us, but I think negative human energy could contribute to them. In the case of Point Pleasant, you've got scarring of the land from the battle that took place there, the betrayal of Chief Cornstalk. It's not quite certain that he really cursed the land, but it was a very bad betrayal of his people by the colonials. And so here again we have the possibility of the Pazuzu scar upon the landscape, some sort of curse. So maybe these things are able to form from this congealed negative energy. And they're often associated with runs of bad health, bad luck. People say that, their lives start falling apart, or they start not being able to sleep at night. We've got reports like that from the Chicago wave here. So I think that we have to look at a whole constellation of, you could call it fallout, from the appearance of these entities, whatever they are. Bottom line, Ken, where do we go from here with our research of these? We've probably got a lull in the wave going on in Chicago, but when these things happen and people see them, where should we go with the information? What should researchers know and do, and what should eyewitnesses do?
Well, certainly, as we discussed, we have to create a climate where more people are comfortable talking about these experiences if they haven't come forward. I think, again, thanking Lon Strickler for keeping me in the loop. I think it's important that all researchers and investigators of this type of phenomenon, that we share our data and that we work together. And, we subject our findings to, or theories to, different types of peer review, just like in any scientific process. So the exchange of information is very important, and getting it out there. And lots to you, Rosemary, for doing a show like this. And we're talking about it. And, maybe there's one person out there listening who's had an experience and who's now feels the support system they need to maybe get in touch with someone and talk about it. So we just need to keep putting it out there and exchanging the information and keep it on the front burner, keep it a topic of discussion.
I think we're going to be hearing more about this this wave in the future, and we've got just about a minute left. But Terry, I wanted to ask you real quickly about the frequency, and I think that paying attention to energy is so important in paranormal investigation, and I'm so glad to hear you do that. Just quickly, if you could tell us in a few words, you mentioned the energy, the frequency was very strange that night. What was going on?
Well, I don't use like EMF meters and that kind of stuff. I use frequency counters. And that night it was 320,000 millihertz. And it was a constant thing. And I know that no citizen band radios or any of those kind of communications operate on that. And so it was very odd that it was a constant frequency the entire night.
Okay, so that winds it up for Strange Dimensions. Another intense episode here with some of the great experts on the weird phenomenon of flying humanoids. I want to thank you, Ken Gerhard, for being with us in the second hour. Terry Rowe for sharing your experiences. So important to be able to do that. You have been listening to Strange Dimensions on KGRAradio.com, and in just a few minutes, Jimmy Church is going to be up with Fade to Black. So stay tuned, and we will see you on down that paranormal road. Good night, everyone.